A gusty, cold wind surged out of the dark night, enveloping a solitary freight truck, slowly moving along a desolate road. A young long-haul driver named Jacob gripped the steering wheel of his truck, trying to keep it on course. As with each meter, his journey grew increasingly perilous. For several hours now, Jacob had been driving through the gloomy forest, feeling an unsettling unease. He glanced briefly at the side mirror, expecting to see an emerging shadow from nowhere, but there was only emptiness. Every creaking tree, every rustle in the bushes seeped into his consciousness, evoking a sense of apprehension. The clock struck midnight, and darkness reigned all around, with only the headlights illuminating a narrow strip of road ahead. However, suddenly, the headlights went out, plunging him into darkness. He brought the truck to a halt. Jacob's heart began to race. In that moment, he sensed that he was not alone. He looked around and saw ghostly shadows slowly approaching his truck. They were dark and indifferent, like the souls of lost travelers, condemned to wander these forgotten paths of eternity. He pressed the ignition button, but the engine refused to start. Fear gripped Jacob as he realized he was trapped by otherworldly forces beyond his comprehension. He desperately turned the key in the ignition, praying for the engine to ignite, even for a moment. Suddenly, the engine roared to life, and the truck jerked forward, leaving the ghostly shadows behind. Through the glow of the headlights, Jacob saw the road winding towards a narrow path where a forsaken hut stood. As if obeying an unknown will, he climbed out of the truck and walked along the narrow path, straight to the hut. When he reached the hut's door, it creaked open with a groan. Inside, darkness prevailed, but a ghostly light emanated from somewhere deep within. Step by step, with apprehension in his eyes, Jacob advanced as if yielding to an unfathomable force. At the end of the room, he beheld an enormous mirror, radiating an eerie glow. He approached and gazed into it. What he saw made his heart freeze in terror. In the mirror, his own reflection stared back at him, his eyes vacant, resembling that of a corpse. In that moment, he realized he had encountered something beyond the realm of reality, teetering on the edge between the world of the living and the realm of mystical secrets. The mirror began to draw Jacob into its lifeless embrace, his consciousness slowly melting away, as if he were descending into an infinite abyss. But at the very last moment, when he was on the brink of losing himself in that ghostly reflection, Jacob reached out for the light, for the world of reality, and with one final effort, broke free from the clutches of the ominous mirror. As he rushed out of the hut, he realized that his willpower had triumphed over the mystical looking glass. From that moment on, Jacob was never the same. The enigmatic experience left an unforgettable mark on him, and he could no longer return to his ordinary life. Nights without sleep were haunted by the spectral breath of mysterious forces, restlessly whispering to him unfathomable truths. He became a witness to mystical phenomena and enigmatic occurrences, interwoven with his reality, as if two parallel worlds had become inseparable. One summer evening, A group of tourists set out on a journey in their cars to an unfamiliar region, aiming to enjoy picturesque views and embark on new adventures. Their path led them through a deep forest, known for its mysterious atmosphere and overgrown pathways. Engrossed in conversations and the joy of the journey, the tourists had no idea that this day would be etched into their memories forever. The sun had already dipped below the horizon when the group decided it was time to find a place to camp for the night. However, they couldn't locate any signs or markers indicating the nearest town or settlement. With no other option, they chose to proceed along a narrow road, hoping it would lead them to some form of civilization. As the sun fully set, the surrounding forest took on a progressively darker and more ominous appearance. Trees seemed much taller than they had during the day, and shadows took on strange, unnatural shapes. An unknown unease began to grip the tourists' souls. Soon, the cars began to behave strangely. Headlights flickered. The radio switched stations on its own, and the GPS lost its signal. The group decided to stop and address the issue. They got out of their cars and noticed that the surroundings had become utterly silent. No rustling leaves, no bird songs, just an eerie quietness. Attempts to backtrack on the road proved futile. It seemed as though the road had simply vanished, replaced by an impenetrable forest. Fear engulfed the group, and they resolved to move forward, hoping to eventually find a way out. Hours passed, yet the trees and landscape remained unchanged. Wary and frightened, the tourists began to hear strange sounds. Rustling footsteps, ominous whispers. They quickened their pace, but it felt like the forest was becoming denser and darker. Finally, after endless days of wandering, having depleted all their food and water supplies, they emerged into an open space. They were exhausted, their clothes tattered, and their faces pale with fear. Before them lay a town that seemed to belong to another era. Houses were abandoned, streets were empty, and an unsettling atmosphere filled the air. The tourists, now in this mystical town, felt as if something strange and unseen was watching over them. Remnants of the past were everywhere. Old photographs on walls, torn fragments of letters, frozen clock, hands on the town's clock tower. Every night, as darkness fell, the spirits of those who had become lost on that dreadful road would begin to make their presence felt. The tourists heard noises, knocks, voices, beckoning to them. But when they tried to locate the source of the sounds, they found nothing. Their sleep became restless and haunted by nightmares, filled with visions of the past. With time, the tourists realized they had become part of this parallel reality, unable to escape it. They suffered the same melancholy as the newly lost souls, and their torment never ceased. It is said that even now, in that region, you can sometimes see car headlights flickering in the night and hear distant voices of tourists who became lost on that fateful night when they lost their way on the mysterious road.